Alright, guys, so today we are going to be doing something that I'm sure you've seen before. Tons of people have done it, but we are going to be doing a keep, sell, loan for the Arsenal squad going into next season. So, obviously, we have the entire Arsenal squad here. This includes loaned players, so players that have been out on loan. And we're going to be going through the entire squad and seeing who I'd keep and who I would potentially let go. Obviously, keep is going to be for players that I want to keep. Undecided, I decided to add that in there because there are some players that I'm kind of on the fence about. I can't really make up my mind, so we'll put them there for now. Loan, obviously, for players that I want to loan. Sell for players that I want to sell. And then contract exit for players that are going to be out of contract this summer. So we are going to start off with El Neni. Now, El Neni is leaving the club, so he's going to go right into contract exit. I think he has 1 month left on his deal, and he will leave the club when it expires. Next up, we have Gabriel. Obviously, a keep for me. He's been one of our best players. I would argue maybe our best defender this season. I think you could. I mean, there's been a lot of good defenders. Saliba, Ben White, but Gabriel's been right up there. He's so crucial to what we do. He's great in both penalty areas. He's excellent in the air, wins headers, clearances, but also attacking wise, he's a real threat from set pieces. He scores goals. He scored that incredible goal against Bournemouth. Obviously, that was disallowed, but he has that in him. And every top team, their center backs chip in with goals when they have to. So he is obviously a keep for me. Next up, we have Kai Havertz. Obviously, a keep. And I mean, if you told me at the start of the season that I would be saying undeniably under no circumstance would I be selling Kai Havertz, I would have laughed hysterically in your face because at the start of the season, I just could not wait until we got rid of this guy. And now he's been incredible. He has been undeniably really good. 20 goal involvements on the season. That is absolutely fantastic. When he's played up front, the way he links up the play, the way he can drop into midfield, he can kind of drift wide, is absolutely fantastic. I really have changed my mind on Kai Havertz. And he is an obvious keep for me. Next up, we have Carl Hein. I would keep him as a third string, third choice goalkeeper. Nothing really to it. I don't think he's ever going to play, but just to keep him as a third choice, he is not the worst. Next up, we have Jesus. And I'm very on the fence about Gabriel Jesus. Because on the one hand, he is a very good player. I don't think he is a striker. I think he's better out wide, but he does have some really good qualities. On the dribble, he's very dangerous, kind of cutting inside, getting the ball on his right foot and bending it into the far post. He is quite good at that. But honestly, he doesn't score enough goals. The fitness is a big concern. He's missed so much football in the past year and a half or so. So I am very on the fence about Jesus. I would like to keep him, but at the same time, I wouldn't be too upset if we got some decent money for him and decided to sell him. Next up, we have Jorginho, signed a new contract, and I would 100% keep him. I think he adds a lot of experience to a really young squad. And we've seen this season, he still has a lot of quality to give on the pitch. We saw in that run of games that we had in the second half of the season, he was fantastic. The way he controls the game, his passing range is really impressive. So I would keep Jorginho. I think he has done enough that he deserves to be kept. Next up, we have Jakub Kivior. another keep for me, another young player that I think absolutely deserves to be involved in the squad. I think at left back, he's looked a little bit shaky at times. He's had some good games at left back as well. I think center back, he's again, good enough to provide cover. And overall, I think Kivior is more than good enough to be involved in this team going forward. Next up, we have Gabriel Martinelli. A very poor season by his standards, but I would 100% keep him. I think he has a lot of talent. He's still young. Let's remember that. He's still at the age where he can very easily improve, and if he has, 2, 3 more good seasons, he could really develop into a world class player. I think he's the one player in our squad that we can use as an outlet on the counterattack. He's so quick, he's so direct. I think his finishing is actually quite good. I think the problem for him has been that we just haven't gotten him in as many good goal scoring positions. We've used him extremely wide. He's been isolated, sometimes 2v1, 3v1 against the opposition's defense. And, overall, again, it hasn't been a good season by him, but 100% a player that we need to keep. Next up, we have Reiss Nelson. And I think it's time. I just think it's time for Reiss Nelson to go. We've seen, he's supposed to be kind of providing backup for Saka, but we've seen, again, he's just not really trusted. I mean, how many times has Saka looked exhausted or, been injured and he still had to play because Arteta doesn't fully trust Reiss Nelson? And, he's just a player that started with a lot of hype and it just hasn't worked out. And I think it's time to let him go. Next up, we have Nketiah, another player that it's just time. He isn't good enough now that Arsenal have improved. We're challenging for titles. We're in the Champions League. He's just a player that isn't good enough anymore. And that's going to happen. You're going to have players that don't level up with the rest of the squad. You look at a player like Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli. Their level has risen with the level of the team. And players like Nketiah, like Reiss Nelson, they've kind of been left behind. And, this summer, I want to see Arsenal get rid of a lot of these players that are good players, but just aren't quite at the level anymore. You see that so much. Man City, even though they have spent an ungodly amount of money, their net spend is actually very low because they're good at selling players and moving players on when players maybe don't fit the team tactically. Maybe they're just not quite up to the level, but they're still good players. So that's what I want to see Arsenal do with Nelson, Nketiah, a couple more players as we'll go on to discuss. Next up, we have the captain, obviously, best midfielder in the Premier League this season. Well, best attacking midfielder. I think you could say Declan Rice, Rodri obviously are in that conversation. But in terms of just pure attacking midfielders, Odegaard is right up there. He's been incredible this season. Most chances created in Europe's top 7 leagues. So, obviously, a keep. I don't really think I need to explain much more. Next up, we have Thomas Partey. Now, this one is so difficult because, on the one hand, he is an excellent player. And when he is in our midfield, we look so much better. The problem with Partey is the injuries. He just is never able to stay fit. Ever since he's come to Arsenal, he has just been, one injury after another. He hasn't really been able to, put a really solid run of games together where he stayed fit. And again, this season, he's missed the majority of the season through injury. And, he's getting older now. And as we've seen with defensive midfielders, obviously Fabinho, Casemiro, once they get a bit older, they're not really able to maintain the physical level that you need to be a defensive midfielder in the Premier League. And that's why I think it's time to move Thomas Partey on. I think we need to get a new defensive midfielder in the summer, or we could get, a kind of box to box midfielder and play Rice there. But we need a new midfielder in the summer because I would let go of Thomas Partey. Next up, we have Aaron Ramsdale. You guys know how much I love Ramsdale, but it's time. It is time. Honestly, really, really sad that we're going to sell him this summer, but let's be honest. Raya's the new number one. Raya's actually been really good in this kind of second half of the season. I think Raya has absolutely justified his selection. And I think Ramsdale is just too good to be a backup. So Ramsdale needs to go get himself some first team football. I think Newcastle were interested, Wolves were interested. He's a young goalkeeper, still has a lot of potential in my opinion. He's English. He could be, if he played, he could have been maybe fighting for that number one spot in the England national team. So we can still get some really, really solid money for Ramsdale. So I would move him on. Next up, we got the Starboy. Obviously, a keep. I don't really think I need to explain much more. I mean, 25 goal involvements, 2 seasons in a row, and he's 22 years old. Like, this guy is absolutely incredible. He is a generational talent. The way that, I don't think he's played that well this season. I think last season he was much better. But the way that he's managed to still have that super high output, that's what you want from your attacking players. You want output, you want goals, you want assists. Because ultimately, that's what the game's all about. It's about scoring goals. And so you need those goals typically to come from your attacking players. Next up, we have Emil Smith Rowe. Again, another one so difficult because I really like Smith Rowe. And a couple of years ago, he was, one of the most exciting talents in our squad. And again, he's just kind of fallen off the map. I don't think, he's barely played in the last couple of years. And I just think it is probably time to go for Smith Rowe. I don't really see a position for him. I don't think he's kind of a natural backup to Odegaard. I don't think he's not a box-to-box midfielder, so he can't really play the kind of Declan Rice, Granit Xhaka role in that on the other side of the midfield. He's certainly not a defensive midfielder. He's not really a winger. I don't think he really works too well out wide like Trossard or Martinelli or Jesus. We still have a lot of players, I think, that would play ahead of him out wide. And so I just don't see where he gets in this team. And, I wouldn't want to see him spend another whole season sitting on the bench. So I think it's time to go for Smith Rowe. And also, I just want to add, selling Smith Rowe, Nelson, and Nketiah, because they are academy players, they would go down as pure profit for FFP. Now, obviously, we saw how much FFP affected us last season. We couldn't sign Raya on a permanent deal. We couldn't sign players in January. So, selling players that would be recorded as pure profit would go a long way to improving our FFP. Next up, we have Trossard, an obvious keep in my opinion. He is, honestly, I think he should start the season next season. I think he's been so good kind of the second half of this season that I don't really think Martinelli gets in the team right now. I think you have to start, the team has to be a meritocracy. So I think you have to reward Trossard for his performances and start the season with him next year. And so Trossard, obvious keep in my opinion. Next up, we have Fabio Vieira. Again, another player I'm very, very 50-50 on. Again, he's left-footed. He has a really good final ball, which makes me want to keep him as a backup to Odegaard because we don't really have anyone else in the squad that can play a final ball as well as Odegaard. And I think Vieira has the closest match to that quality. But then again, he hasn't been great when he has played. He's been injured a lot. And then since he's come back from injury, he's barely played. So I'm very, very undecided on him. I think his profile is something that we should be kind of looking into keeping and developing, but I'm just not sure whether he can live up to that because he hasn't shown anything really since he's come to the club about his quality, and it's kind of a worry because he's been here 2 years now, hasn't really played, hasn't really shown us anything. But I think maybe one more season. I think for Vieira. Next up, Ben White, obvious keep. Again, one of our best players, one of our best defenders, and yeah, Ben White is awesome. Next up, this guy. Yeah. I'm not sure I want to sell Zinchenko. I don't really think he's going to leave the club this summer. I think we're going to keep him for another year. But he's just, I don't know. There's just something about Zinchenko that does not sit right with me. Watching this guy defend it's like having a nightmare. It's really quite a scary thing to watch this guy. He doesn't know how to defend. Arteta I don't think Arteta fully trusts him in midfield. That's why he doesn't play there. And we've seen he's been dropped for the kind of end of the season. Even when he's been fit, he hasn't really featured. So I'm very on the fence about Zinchenko. I wouldn't want to sell him this summer just because we're already a bit light on defenders. And so if you sell him, obviously you have to bring someone in to replace him. And I already think we need to buy a defender as it is. So I would probably keep him. But again, not really excited about him staying at the club. Next up, we have Lokonga. He needs to be sold. He's never good enough to play for Arsenal. He's had a fantastic season at Luton Town. He's never going to be worth as much money as he is now. So I would take advantage of that and cash in. Next up, we have Marquinhos. I think I would send him on loan one more time, try and build up some value, and sell him. I don't think he's ever going to break into the first team at Arsenal. It was a cheap signing. Hasn't really worked. But I think one more loan, try and build up that value, and then move him on. Next up, Declan Rice. Obvious keep. Do I really need to explain why? This guy is just too good. He is just too good. Next up, we have Jurrien Timber. Obvious keep for me. I can't wait to see him next season. A real shame this season with the injury. And, even when he came on against Everton, he looked good. Like, he looked sharp. He went on a really, really good run. He picked up the ball, drove inside, and then I think he got fouled on the edge of the box, but he looks like a real player. And I think, wherever we play him, right back, center back, left back, I think he's going to be fantastic for us going forward. Next up, we have Cedric. He is going to be leaving the club on a free. I think that's already been confirmed, so he can go. Next up, we have Runarsson, however you say his name. He needs to be sold. Absolutely disastrous signing by Arsenal. I don't know why on earth we got this guy. I know I think it was the year after Martinez left and we needed backup to Leno. But why Runarsson? Why? He is absolutely useless, never good enough to play for this club, and I cannot believe he is still technically at the club, that we've just been loaning him this whole time. Because this guy is useless. Get rid, please. Kieran Tierney, again, a player that I would like to see us keep, but I just don't see where he gets into this team. I just don't think he tactically suits what Arteta's trying to do. I don't think he's good enough on the ball. He's not tactically flexible. He doesn't invert. He can't really, do any of the things that a kind of Pep Arteta, sort of fullback needs to. And so, again, I would sell him, get some money for him. He's still, I wouldn't say he's young, but he's not particularly old. I'd say he's going into his kind of prime years. And again, he's a good player, just doesn't really suit what we're trying to do. So I think we could get some pretty solid money for him. William Saliba, obviously, the Rolls Royce of defenders. What a player. Needs to be kept at all costs. And he is the kind of player that I'm a bit worried where if we don't start winning some trophies in the next few years, he'll go. He is good enough to play for Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, whoever it might be. And, he could go there if we don't start winning trophies. So, yeah, obvious keep. And, yeah, fantastic player. Next up, we have Tomiyasu, another player I would keep. Again, super versatile, good in a squad role. Again, fitness is a little bit too inconsistent to be a kind of guaranteed starter, in my opinion. But overall, he's an excellent player. He's shown at the end of the season that he's more than capable of coming in, playing left back, which isn't really his natural position. And he's been fantastic. I think he's the best 1v1 defender in the squad. And overall, he's just kind of the perfect rotational option. So next up we have Okonkwo, not quite sure how to say his name again. I would loan him one more time. Again, same thing as Marquinhos. Just a player that I don't think is ever going to be good enough to break into the first team. I'm already keeping Hein as a third string keeper, so I don't think we really need him. And I would loan him, try and build up his value again, and sell him. So, next up we have Raya. I would keep him. I think he's going to be bought on a permanent deal for around, I think it was £30 million was the agreed fee, which again is pretty significant money for a goalkeeper, but I think he's going to be well worth it. We've seen, comes in first season, Golden Glove winner. He did have a pretty shaky start, but he improved as the season went on, and I think next year, with him being here on a permanent deal, there being kind of that, no kind of uncertainty about his future, I think he's going to be even more confident, and I think he's going to be even better. And lastly, we have Nuno Tavares. Sell. I'm sick and tired of watching clowns defend at this football club, and this guy defends like a headless chicken. So get rid, please. So again, that is what I would do with the current Arsenal squad. Obviously, I would be getting rid of a fair few amount of players. So in July, probably, or the end of June. So when the transfer market actually opens, when there's maybe more rumors going around, I will actually do a video where I go over my ideal transfer window for Arsenal, how much money I think we could get for these players that we're selling, how much money we'd have to start with, and then obviously players that I would want to see us bring in. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you all in a bit.